Hi everybody, namaste. Welcome to Bhagavad Gita for the homies. Today we're reading chapter 5, and that's entitled Karma Yoga, Action in Krsna Consciousness. Bhagavad Gita as it is by Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Chapter 5, Karma Yoga. Arjuna said, "O Krishna, first of all you ask me to renounce work, and then again you recommend work with devotion. Now, will you kindly tell me definitely which of these two is more beneficial?" The Blessed Lord said, "The renunciation of work and work in devotion are both good for liberation, but of the two, work in devotional service is better than renunciation of works. One who neither hates nor desires the fruits of his activities is known to be always renounced. Such a person, liberated from all dualities, easily overcomes material bondage and is completely liberated, O mighty armed Arjuna." You know, recently I saw a video of a monk speaking with a celebrity presenter on her talk show. And she asked him, you know, a lot of monks are silent and they don't say anything, and but you talk, so why don't you do silent meditation rather than this talking meditation? And the monk said, because speaking of Krishna and his pastimes is as good as silence. So when you speak, it should be something positive and spiritual, and that's as good as sitting in meditation being silent when you're speaking of God. We call this HARE KRSNA when we talk of Krishna and his pastimes, you know, his teachings and his, you know, when he was growing up, and, you know, all those little material pastimes. When we speak of them, it's called HARE KRSNA. And to be able to hear that, especially from a pure devotee, is one of the most blessed things that can change your life one day, you know? Okay, so we continue. Only the ignorant speak of karma yoga and devotional service as being different from the analytical study of the material world. Those who are actually learned say that he who applies himself well to one of these paths achieves the results of both. Because when you devote yourself to the spiritual path, you will get material results as well as spiritual results. Because one who knows that the position reached by means of renunciation can also be attained by works in devotional service, and who therefore sees that the path of works and the path of renunciation are one, see things as they truly are. You can renounce the world and still perform action and works if your action is dovetailed with your spiritual practice. Unless one is engaged in the devotional service of the Lord, more renunciation of activities cannot make one happy. The sages, purified by works of devotion, achieve the supreme without delay. One who works in devotion, who is a pure soul, and who controls his mind and senses, is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. That's the kind of person you want as your guru. You find somebody who is always working in devotion, that he's a pure soul, can control his mind and senses, treats everybody as though they're dear to him. That's Guruji. A person in the divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping, and breathing, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, opening or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects, and that he is aloof from them. That's called avadu, when you feel like you're aloof from the material world and you just always hankering for spiritual knowledge. But you know that everything you do in the material plane, from when you get up in the morning and evacuate your bowels, brush your teeth, open your eyes, close your eyes, these are just mechanical things that your robot is doing. The programming is coming from the soul and from the external material world. And that's where the conflict lies. You know, you have this innate spiritual knowledge, you know, like you feel some, you know, deja vu. I've done this before. I know this already. This seems right to me. And then there's the material world with its bombardment of material sufferings and pains, and our ego trying to always escape the pain and be comforted, sense gratification, because that's how we absorb this world, with our senses. So obviously we want to gratify these senses. We don't want to be poked with sharp sticks and feel the heat of the sun, and the cold of the snow. We want to always have this comfortable temperature. We want to be comfortable. And as long as we're comfortable, there's no change, there's no action. We just want to stay still in this comfort. But it takes action to be comfortable. Like, let's say God creates the flower, but doesn't tell which bees to take the nectar. Any bee, any bird, any ant can come and take what God has produced. And same with humans. We come to take what God has produced. Problem is, we claim it as our own. We build a fence around a coconut tree, and that will cause you to steal from me. One who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme God, is not affected by sinful action, as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. The lotus grows in muddy water. The lily separates, the stem and the flower from the filth. And that's how we must be. We must try to rise above it like a lotus. The yogis, abandoning attachment, act with body, mind, intelligence, and even with the senses, only for the purpose of purification. The steadily devoted soul attains unadulterated peace because he offers the results of all his activities to me, whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled. When the embodied living being controls his nature and mentally renounces all actions, he resides happily in the city of 9 gates, the material body, neither working nor causing work to be done. Our bodies are alive only because we have a soul. Without the soul, we're dead. What's the symptom of a living body versus a dead body? A living body has a soul, a dead body does not. So these bodies are actually just embodied souls with a material body. So we're embodied into this soul that we take as, I'm Aldo, I'm Ananta, I'm a man, I'm, beardy, of this age, I. We consider all this to be actually me, but really the soul is who we are, and our soul is just embodied with this covering. We call this the ego mentality, right? This body is the city of the 9 gates. It has 9 gates into, the interior. You have your 2 eyes, your 2 ears, 2 nostrils, your 1 mouth, your urethra, and your anus. And those are the 9 gates. Protect those 9 gates. Protect everything that enters or exits them. The embodied spirit, master of the city of his body, does not create activities, nor does he induce people to act, nor does he create the fruits of action. All this is enacted by the modes of material nature. Our embodied spirit, that's the soul, is the master of his body, but he does not create action. The action comes from the material world, right? All this from the modes of material nature, whether it's the mode of goodness, the mode of passion, or the mode of ignorance. These are the 3 inspirations to which we move and go into the next thing. I want this, it's passion, I get up and get it. I want to praise God, so I'm jumping up and singing. That's another action that we do, that's from the mode of goodness. And then there's just like, routine. I get up and scratch my butt, go to the kitchen, and say if you light up a cigarette first thing in the morning, drink a cup of coffee. That's the mode of ignorance. That's just, you're on mechanical mode until you just, wake up. So we want to cultivate more goodness than passion and ignorance. Although, as long as you're in the material body, all 3 of those are going to be there in different degrees, like levels on a stereo equalizer. So just try to cultivate goodness. Don't worry, everything else is going to come. You're still going to get your likes, and your dislikes are going to come regardless. So just let's try to cultivate good attitudes, the good things. Nor does the Supreme Spirit assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their real knowledge. This body covers our real knowledge, because our soul is full of knowledge. It's the reservoir of knowledge. That's why people say God, Guru, and Self are one, because they're all in you. But don't be deluded in thinking that I can just follow any old whim that pops into my material mind. Our thoughts are not our soul. You know, our soul may influence our thoughts, but that's only when we cultivate, you know, listening to our soul, listening to our good idea, and not listening to our ego, which is in the mind because it's material. And all it wants you to do is be materially comfortable. The soul, however, wants you to shed the ego and become one with the spirit, so we can escape this cycle of birth and death over and over again. When, however, one is enlightened with the knowledge by which nescience is destroyed, then his knowledge reveals everything, as the sun lights up everything in the daytime. So once you stop listening to the ego, concentrate on the soul, it's like the sun coming, chasing away the evening. When one's intelligence, mind, faith, and refuge are all fixed in the Supreme, then one becomes fully cleansed of misgivings through complete knowledge, and thus proceeds straight on the path of liberation. You know, I always tell people, you know, once you're on this path, it never leaves you, because you start to recognize that everything is on this path. Whether it's material or spiritual, it's the same path. You just got to correct your actions that you trod this path of the least amount of resistance. And the humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater. Because once you have this vision, you see everybody as equal. You see the soul in everybody and know that they're just playing different roles according to their karma. But in the end, we all have the same knowledge, which is complete knowledge. We all have bliss, you know, we all have eternity. So when we see each other running around because we're confused in this world, we say, love the soul, not the role. That's how we love everybody. We don't love everybody, because how can you love a murderer? How could you love, you know, somebody who's just in the destruction and chaos all the time? Because it's not the chaos and destruction that we love. It's the embodied spirit. It's the soul, not the role that it's playing, that we love. And sometimes in the course of expressing that love, you give somebody a hug, and sometimes you got to kick them in the butt and push them away, so their lesson is completed in their own time span without interrupting your own peace. So remember that. We're all just walking each other home. Love the soul, not the role. These are all Ram Dass sayings, you know, the hippie guru who enlightened America with teaching us that, you know, sometimes we see trees in the forest, and some are bent, some are shaped, or some are straight, some are crooked. And we don't judge a tree by that, right? We love all trees because they're trees. I think of people the same way. Some are straight, some are crooked, some are bent, you know, some are broken. And they all have the same soul inside of them. And so we must love that soul, because love is who we truly are. And love is truly who God is. So, you know, when we cultivate love, we can see it everywhere. Those whose minds are established in sameness and equanimity have already conquered the conditions of birth and death. They are flawless like Brahman, and thus they are already situated in Brahman. Very difficult. We may have glimpses of oneness. You know, I know a lot of people growing up, we would eat mushrooms, and all of a sudden everything is one. You know, we see it. We can see the soul of the tree and the blades of grass and the birds and the, you know, and everything, and you just sit there and smile and be like, everything is beautiful. But the problem is with substances, once they're out of your system, you tend to forget. And the same goes with spiritual practice. You practice and you can see the oneness and love with everybody. But when you start to wane on that practice, you tend to forget, because material nature is strong. It beats you in the head every time. You know, it's fighting you, it's pushing against you all the time. It's like gravity. Matter of fact, it is gravity, because spiritual nature is not confined to gravity. Our material nature is. So this gravity is what's driving, you know, all of our egos. A person who neither rejoices upon achieving something pleasant, nor laments upon obtaining something unpleasant, who is self-intelligent, unbewildered, and who knows the science of God, is to be understood as already situated in transcendence. Such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure or external sense objects, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme. You know, I love my car until it breaks down, and then it makes me upset. I love my material body until it becomes achy, you know, and in pain. But with material pleasure always comes to an end, and it always brings anger or resentment or some kind of unpleasant distress, you know. It's the nature of material reality. That's why the Buddha says existence is suffering, because we're always constantly suffering in this life and always trying to figure out a way to alleviate this suffering, you know, one way or another. I'm hot, let me go find air conditioning, or let me sit under the shade of a tree. I'm hungry, let me fill my belly, you know. But there's also different levels to how we appease the suffering, you know. I'm cold, let me just wear a simple, you know, cloth to make me warm, or let me kill a bunch of animals and wear a mink coat. Like there's levels in between there. All this has to do with the ego and how much our ego controls our material actions. Which mode of material nature are we putting in the most? You know, is it the mode of goodness, passion, or ignorance? You know, and by that is how we choose all the options given to us in material life. You know, if you want unlimited happiness, you have to seek that which is eternal, which the only thing eternal in this world is God, spiritual nature, you know, our own souls. So we have to cultivate that knowledge for eternal happiness, for happiness that doesn't end. It can't let you down because you don't rely on it for your material happiness. You go to it when material happiness lets you down, because it's always there and always happy. You know, people always have to confuse and conflate God with the suffering of this world. How can there be a God when there's children are dying and the good die, you know, bad things happen to good people? That's not the issue. That God knowledge will teach you why bad things happen to good people, why, you know, this suffering occurs. That's what spiritual knowledge is for. It's not a crutch to lean on when things go bad. Oh, my life is going to shit. Please, God, take it away. Jesus, take the wheel. Or, you know what I mean? Like we try to get rid of the responsibility of the actions that we created. It doesn't work like that. True spirituality teaches you why we're going through what we're going through. And then when you see it happen, you have a aha moment, you know? This is why I understand now. I understand. And that is what alleviates your suffering. That is what truly alleviates suffering. Get out of the mode of ignorance. Get out of the mode of acting only in passion. Get into the mode of goodness. Goodness is, for lack of a better word, but it's that spirituality where, you know, there is no right or wrong, good or bad. In the spiritual world, things are, as they need to be. An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery, which are due to contact with material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, so the wise man does not delight in them. Before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, he is a yogi and he is happy in this world. Let me repeat that. Before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, he is a yogi and he is happy in this world. That's the man that you must look for and follow. He who loves Krishna the most gives up his material urges, you know? He can tolerate them. He can check the force of desire and definitely check anger. That's why he loves everybody. He checked his forces of anger. One whose happiness is within, who is active within, who rejoices within, and is illuminated within is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the Supreme, and ultimately he attains the Supreme. You know, back in the occult days, people would talk about do what thou wilt is the whole of the law, as in the Thetas, the Aleister Crowley teachings, Thelmism. But that doesn't mean actions don't have a consequence. That also doesn't mean that acting altruistically or without your ego isn't the proper course, because when you act and selflessly give, you receive. It's actually the more perfect way to get what you want, because it's not just ego-driven and immediate material desire gratification. But when you learn the power of patience and you learn the power of altruism, these things become even a greater lesson. So it's like you could be a Satanist or somebody that practices the occult and still be a good person. Because if you take from somebody, or if you feel like you're doing bad, it's that law of karma that comes back and bad things happen to you. In the Wiccan philosophy, any negative spells you cast out comes back at you 10 times, tenfold. So, it's a true force of life just to be a good person. It's true. Being a good person is good. It comes back to you better than being selfish or egotistical or a jerk, just for being a jerk's sake. If the world made you angry now, people treat me like shit, so I'm going to be angry. It's not the way to do it. Once you understand why people treat you like shit, you can still love them. You might not want to be around them, but you can still love them. You don't have to cultivate hate. Cultivate love. One who is beyond duality and doubt, whose mind is engaged within, who was always busy working for the welfare of all sentient beings, and who is free from all sins, achieves liberation in the Supreme. Those who are free from anger and all material desires, who are self-realized, self-disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection, are assured of liberation in the Supreme in the very near future. I heard a story where a guy was meditating on being freed from the cycle of birth and death, and God appears before him, and God says, "Go ahead, ask me a question." And the guy's like, "Will I attain liberation in this lifetime?" And the guy's like, "No, it's going to take you 7 more lifetimes before you attain liberation." And this yogi got all mad. "What? 7 more? I've done this. I've done that. Why? I should be going in this lifetime." And God just shook his head, poof, and disappeared. And he sees how angry that yogi was when he couldn't attain liberation right now. But then a proper Vaishnava meets God and says, "God, will I attain liberation?" And God says, "Yes, but it will take you many, many, many lifetimes, maybe hundreds of lifetimes." And the Vaishnava gets so happy. "Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. I don't care how many lifetimes. At least I know I'm guaranteed liberation at some point. I will gladly suffer knowing that I'm going through the suffering to finally attain liberation." So there's the difference, Let's try to keep a positive outlook on life. Shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the 2 eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils, thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence. The transcendentalist becomes free from desire, free from anger. One who is always in this state is certainly liberated. It's a very difficult state to be in. It's like you have to sit there and breathe a certain way, keep your mind focused a certain way, try to shut out all external stimuli. It's very, very, very difficult. But, you can do it. There's practices for it. Astanga yoga, Hatha yoga, Prana yoga, But we're talking about karma yoga. The sages, knowing me as the ultimate purpose of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and benefactor and well-wisher of all living beings, attain peace from the pangs of material miseries. So really all you have to know is God's there for us. Put your faith in God and cultivate God knowledge, your soul and your God knowledge through that. And that way you'll attain your liberation and you'll be happy here and now throughout your whole life as all these miseries happen. And then in the end, it'll all come, full circle and everything will work out. I know it sounds like a lot, but this chapter 5, Karma Yoga, is very important. It's the one yoga, if you're just starting to do yoga, start with Karma Yoga. I'll start with Japa Yoga, Karma Yoga. These things will all help build up your Bhakti Yoga, your devotional practice. And once you get your devotional practice going, don't let it stop.